Hello and welcome to the show. My guest today is Anna Sinclair. She's the owner of Total Mom Inc. and Sinclair Creative Agency. We'll talk about her beginnings in the USSR and her life now as a business owner and a mom in Canada. Thank you for being here, Anna. I really appreciate your time. I've been reading about you. You and I became followers on Instagram, and we follow someone mutually, and you said, how do we not know each other? So here we are a couple of months later. So thank you for being here.
And thanks for having me. I know it's been a little bit of a hard time getting a time in our schedules. We're both so busy, but this is perfect. I'm glad we're here now.
Glad to have you. Okay, so I want to talk about really this evolution of your story because of the way you came to business, how the way you came to Canada, the way, where you came from. I know you overcame really insurmountable obstacles to even be sitting where you are right now. So let's talk a little bit about your upbringing and where you came from, just so that we can glean more about just how far you've come.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we all have our stories of where we've come from. And I think the beautiful thing about becoming a woman and an adult is you get to process and look back at what that upbringing really meant and what it's saying to you. So this last few years have been extremely transformational for me to accepting and understanding why I am the way I am and what things mean to me. And, if you really look at my story, I was born in the USSR, former USSR at the time, so Donetsk, Ukraine, and then raised in Israel, and then moved to Canada as my third country. And both in Ukraine and in Israel, those significantly impactful moments of, in Israel, it was the Gulf War. It was, being bombed and wearing gas masks and hiding under tables, like just really being a child that's like on the loose at 3 a.m, like just coming to Canada. It was such a culture shock to me, starting school here and just seeing how involved parents and schools and systems and structures were. It was like I went from running around and absolute chaos and my world is not safe to like, you're in the free country of the land. And like Canada was all about immigrants and everyone coming from everywhere. So, my upbringing wasn't very safe. It wasn't very stable. And, we essentially had to start over from the very beginning, learn English as a third language, and then kind of take ourselves, I have 2 brothers, take ourselves through it and, make something of ourselves and our future. And, also watch our parents experience immigration and really experience like starting over. And, it was a huge identity crisis on many occasions. It was like rediscovering why things were apparent to me as not worthy or this or that over and over again, which really ties into my life and my career now and why I want to help women and people in general.
Well, when we talk about how what it's like your English is a third language, not second, but a third language. And, you're so far removed from it now, right?
Yeah.
Come so far. But what were some of the difficulties and what you thought your life could be because of that? What were the limitations that you hadn't even set on yourself yet, but you were experiencing because you were a woman, because English was your third language, because of all these things that you had to overcome that you couldn't even really see coming yet?
I think, in Canada, in the US, like in general, there's certain things that you need access to or be learning or achieving to get you to a place. Like how do I explain this? Success in the general Western world, or whatever we want to call it, looks very specific. It's like, who are you? How much money do you make? What have you achieved? And then add like our demographic of, people in this day and age that are hustling, doing multiple ventures and things. Like it's a go, do it all, make it all. So I didn't know and didn't have access to a lot of things that would have prepared me to get into this situation now. I don't know if that makes sense. I think I have to like scale this back. Like, for example,
I think it does make sense because I think you're not even sure you didn't even know what you needed access to.
I didn't. I really didn't. And now knowing my privilege of access, and also just working with nonprofit organizations and then seeing youth empowerment around the world and then seeing different parts of the world and what children and people don't have access to, it kind of sounds silly talking about my lack of access because it's much worse for so many other people. But if we're going to just talk about my experience today, I think lack of understanding about financials and like understanding that like I would be in a position where I would have to be financially stable. I would have to understand what credit scores are. I would have to set myself up for success. I would have to do it all alone, start from scratch. It's not like my immigrant parents would just step in and be like, let's build a business or you need to
Right.
be for that. So that's one thing. But the other thing is just like the culture shock of being a hustler out of the source of necessity for safety. It's this scarcity and fear of like, I don't ever want to be in those positions again. I don't want to not have food. I don't want to have to steal from backpacks to get my lunch. Like, it makes me so emotional thinking about this little girl that like was so scared of basic needs of like safety or food or whatever to then propel herself into being so busy and so hardworking to the point of like exhaustion. And I think what I've learned over the last few years is that like we all have something that pushes us, and it could either be toxic, where it's like you're pushing yourself out of fear, which in my case was something that drove me, and it made positive results for other people and even me. But at the grit of it all, at the very messy, dark place that nobody sees, it was exhausting, and it was pushing me to succeed so much because I was so scared of losing it all and being in a situation where like if I didn't provide for myself and my family, who would? What would happen to me? I've seen it all. I've seen the worst pits of what happens when you have no food, no shelter, no nothing. Like, I've seen it. I've been there. I lived in an airport for 3.5 weeks before we even got entry into Canada. So I think that's important to think about. It's just like, access to the psychology and the mental health support should be something that everybody has, that not necessarily, you don't necessarily know you need it until you're a grown adult going, I'm processing
You have
everything.
to have that mentor. You have to have, hopefully, people like what you're doing now, and we'll definitely get into that a little bit later in the show. The people who've been through it, who are reaching behind themselves and helping others through it along the way. Let's take
Yeah.
a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk about your pop career and the things that you said you were busy doing a lot of things, and you were busy doing a lot of things, and how motherhood really changed the course of your life. We'll come back in just a moment. We are talking with Anna Sinclair. And Anna, I want to talk with you about your business, Total Mom Incorporated, but also just, you were talking earlier about how doing all the things, kind of trying to make sure you had making a success, make sure you were earning, make sure you were taking care and providing. And one of those things was in your pop career. And so let's talk about that and how close you got and the choices you made along the way. So how did that come to be? And then we know how you transitioned, out of that because of the choices you made, and actually the choices that your record company made because of motherhood.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode, but I will try to condense it.
Sure.
Growing up, I always wanted to be a pop star. It was like, the childhood dream, like children want to be astronauts, doctors, lawyers. I wanted to be Britney Spears. Like, it was just a thing.
Yes.
I loved singing. I loved acting. I loved dancing. It was just something I always wanted, but never got into because it didn't seem to hit off all the boxes when you're getting ready for high school, college, university. It's not a school that you go to become that. So basically, it happened really quickly. I was going through a really weird chapter in my life where I had a serious breakup with a gentleman that I thought I was going to get married to. And we broke up. It was devastating. It was a whole thing. And I went home and I wrote a song, and I thought, you know what? What if like right now was the time for me to get into this music business? What if I like write my first song and this and that? Anyways, long story short, I messaged every single person I know on Facebook and just kind of reached out to all these record label people and managers and producers. And yeah, it just happened. Like I got signed to Universal. I ended up on the Disney and Family Channel. I was doing 30,000 people stadium tour. I was headlining Canadian Music Week. I was, I wrote an album. It got considered for a Juno here in Canada. Like it was popping off. And I really loved it because I got to really be the creative director of music videos and albums. And because I was a hustler and because I wanted it so badly, and like failure was just not an option, I survived what I would call the 4 years of my music record label business experience, just trailblazing it. Like I literally head down was like, nobody's hitting on me. Nobody's going to try anything on me. Like nothing. Like it was, I just wanted to get that deal and I wanted to get to the US and become a pop star. And I got pretty far. I actually flew out and then drove around and I landed myself a massive opportunity and a record deal in the US. I'm in the US and long story short, I find out that I'm pregnant with my husband at the time. And essentially that's when it all fell apart. And that was the beginning of where I'm at now, which is, creating a company called Total Mom Inc., supporting moms personally and professionally. The record label essentially saw it as a liability. I had someone actually say, what if you love your baby more than this contract? It was, at the time, we were not in the women empowerment area where, if you're pregnant, let's get you on a magazine front cover, like women empowerment.
Yeah, right.
Time where it was like, we're not going to film a music video with you pregnant. No one's ever done that in the history of all time. There were no women publicly pregnant and proud at that time. So it was just my time. It wasn't my timing. It was just the timing was off. But the silver lining was that I had come home. I told my husband, like, what are we going to do? This was everything I ever worked for. Like, maybe there's another label that wants to sign me, blah, blah, blah. And he said, why don't we just try and take some time off? And that's when I went to a local baby show, trade show, where all these new moms would come out and buy baby stuff. And I had a massive transformational shift happening when I actually even recall it like epically. I was standing there and I saw like hundreds and hundreds of women walking around shopping. And I thought, oh my God, this is the biggest thing. This is the biggest event and concept for moms. And all it's doing is selling baby stuff for them to buy. And I thought that's when my brain was like, well, what about their mind, their body, their soul, food, body, like all of my brain, my whole entity of me was like, what about their careers? And I just started researching online to see what was available for moms like myself who were career driven, but also like thought outside of the box. Like they wanted to cover all aspects of their life. They were multifaceted, multidimensional, and they wanted like support. And there was just nothing of the caliber that I would have expected and needed. So I went and created it.
And that's when you founded, or that's when you started Total Mom Inc. And when you have Total Mom Inc. and you also have your agency.
Yeah.
And when we were talking before we started recording, talking about Sinclair Creative Agency, and you said it was something I was already doing. I just had to own it and name it and give it its light, right? It was already happening. And I can relate to that. I think sometimes, people want to know, I've been asked this a lot of times, what do you do? Well, it's a big answer. And and I don't mean it's a big, like I'm a big deal. I'm just saying there's a lot of different things that I do that's not really simple to just give one answer. And I think when I'm most comfortable is when nobody's trying to box in or trying to, that we can do a lot of different things. We don't want to be frazzled or fragmented and, taking ourselves in too many directions that we aren't giving enough to each part. But I do think, and what I've learned about you and from you over these last weeks and a few months is that you, as part of your story, that's your business. And I always think that some of the most successful businesses are about storytelling. Do you own a hardware store, for example? Is that something that's been passed down in your family, or is it something you started on your own? Or Are you someone who works there and it's a huge corporation? Or are you an entrepreneur and have these other ways of going about business? But the story behind how you got to where you are, I think is
Yeah.
the most interesting. And I always find it even more interesting when there is storytelling happening in your business, which yours is all about that.
I mean, yeah. I mean, how could I not? I think if you look at my career now, and let's just look at just the accolades or whatever, if you look at my accolades and there's nothing behind that, what would be so magnificent about successes and accolades if there really wasn't, like, it's like people would look at it and be like, oh, she's just so privileged and she just knows people and she's got all of it. But like without the dirty side of, well, it wasn't always like that. And every single one of those opportunities took 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, blood, sweat, and tears, tireless nights crying. Like, we need to know people's stories because we need to humanize the woman experience, the motherhood experience, and most certainly just the fact that being an entrepreneur is the most hardest thing in the world, and it has everything to do with your personal life. Like, it's usually our personal life that drives us to create companies and businesses and solve solutions. So it's a disservice to not have the story so much so involved in that process.
Yeah, I agree completely because a lot gets lost along the way, right? A lot can get lost along the way. Now, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about a bit about just the help you've given to people along the way. I know you consult. I know you've done angel investing. I know, but it isn't really about just the money for you, right? It's about passing other things along and not your percentage and all of those things. Although that's business, that's part of business. We know this. But let's
Yeah.
talk about specifically, um, that whole idea about reaching behind yourself after you've been through something and trying to pull someone else through and
Yeah.
hopefully less scathed than you felt, that learn as you go education is hard in any scenario. And I think in business particularly. So let's take a break. We're talking with Anna Sinclair of Total Mom Inc. We'll be back in just a moment. We're back finishing up with Anna Sinclair, Total Mom Inc., as well as your agency, Sinclair Creative Agency. Let's talk about the angel investment, but not so much. We hear that and it means a lot of different things to a lot of people, but it really means contact Anna and see if she'll invest in my business. And that's not what we're doing here at all, because you're about to launch something larger on a bigger scale for the people who you might not be able to help individually, but who can get the resources they need to help themselves. So let's talk about that, because a lot of people have success in their business and they make their way and they just keep making their way and making their way and making their way and don't necessarily help others find their way also. So I already know the answer to this, but I want you to share, what about your experience made you so passionate about making sure you're leading the way for other, particularly female entrepreneurs?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's those situations that I've been in, trying to access capital for my own business with knowing what was on the line. And what was on the line was, if I didn't get more money, I couldn't hire more people to serve more people and help people. And I'd already put everything, like my heart, soul, my blood, sweat, and tears, into growing Total Mom Inc. And when Total Mom Inc. needed funding the most, we just were not in a position, and I was not in a position to acquire that funding. And during the pandemic, I had really quickly learned about the statistics around, venture capital for women, and the sad and horrible numbers of like less than 3% of capital goes to women. And then if you're a woman of color and such, it's even less, like 1 to 1.5%. Those statistics are horrible. Like, I don't even know how I'm saying that out loud, and it's 2023, but the fact of the matter is that it's harder for a woman to access capital, and it's harder for a woman to get the money injection that she needs to take her business to the next level. And I think for myself, with Canada's Total Mom Pitch, which is a national award-winning program under Total Mom Inc., I saw over 7,000 applications of real life stories. And like, you can't forget those stories. Like, you read the application and you hear about women who overcame diseases, or are single moms, or have children with disabilities, have their own disabilities, all of these things that are just, I don't know, gut wrenching to think about, like how someone would not want to come in and give them money to just do their dream and like just solve the solution that they're solving. And it just, to me, it was like, I may not have all the money in the world to help these women and all of them. And my company may not have all the grants to give them all a grant. But that's when I kind of started learning about venture capital and firms and putting together other resources and funds. And, you know, I've been speaking to and working with an incredible woman named Erin Cisco. And we've been talking about the future of launching a venture fund and really getting the capital together to invest in women. And really at the end of all of it, it's way too difficult to get funding in the traditional landscape. The funding ecosystem is so broken, and it's all about formalities, and it's all about what your credit scores are or your fluctuating numbers and things, and if you're seasonal or not seasonal. And there's just too many predatory loans out there that are not feasible for women and women with children and women who are single or not single. Like, it's almost like we are having to overcome the highest peaks and valleys just to get this business off the ground. And especially when you get to a place where your business is popping off the ground, that's when you need capital the most, because when things are finally going right, that's when you need to be able to hire people to see that vision through. And I kept seeing stories of women almost there. And I don't know, it hit me personally. I was like, I'm so sick and tired of being almost there. I'm sure they're sick and tired of being almost there. And it just personally spoke to me that, you know, maybe with my connections and my network and the people I know and the things that I've experienced, that I could turn all of that into a way of helping women get funded. And just naturally, like, you know, I have to do something.
I think it's true too, because so many times we give up just when we're about to turn the bend and we would have had success. And I seem to be having a lot of these conversations on my show lately, probably because it's a place where I am and I'm gravitating toward their stories. And I'm surrounded by a lot of women in my life who are entrepreneurs and starting businesses or making a career change. And so I think too that what you're saying, you know, you're right. You can't give everyone all the money.
No.
And it is important, I think, too, when someone's living a dream, to go figure out for themselves sometimes. But just at least give me a checklist and I'll do everything on that checklist. I just need to know what's on the checklist. I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, is they don't really know what is necessary. Yeah. So I just respect everything that you're doing. And I do think that you should come back on the show again when you start that other process, because there's so much to talk about. And we could really just give women a lot of information and opportunity, men as well. It works for everyone who's considering business or needing that support. So thank you for being here. And I'll look forward to having you back after everything is put into place and we can give more information about your next venture. Thank you so much, Anna.
I love it. Thank you for having me.
It's been great. Thanks.